Right. I just want to thank Leo and Sebs Solomon for their great discussion and presentation on the radio eugenics radiation as in ecology as a eugenics science initiative and tying this back to Oliver L. Reiser, who was a researcher he was a professor, but he was considered sort of the researcher for this UN based think tank that was tied to the elite Institute of Advanced Study at Princeton and some nuclear scientists and then to Andrea Puharich, the CIA mind control military scientist, and the Theosophists. And this has developed into the counterculture movement or scene that's sort of based on this New Age Freemason science. And then people get co-opted into thinking it's some kind of alternative, but it's really all based on Platonic philosophy. And the same can even be said of leftist ideology, even anarchism. It's still based on Platonic philosophy, which goes back to the mathematics and then to music theory. And the 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 key point that Leo pointed out, that it was a quote from Oliver L. Reiser at the very end of this two-part talk that I'll link in the description of this video. But he has images from the book World Sensorium. And I never read that book. It must not have been at the University of Minnesota library that I remember. But at any rate, I had noticed this because Alison McDowell also had linked the World Sensorium, and I noticed Oliver Reiser was discussing the square root of -1, and he's calling it an emergent asymmetry as a dimension of time that it gets translated into space, and so it's like a higher dimension. And then Leo said how that this would be like the -1, the square root of -1 would be the radius of the circle. Well, what this is actually referring to is the Bloch sphere. So it's the 720-degree rotation, which is actually like a Mobius strip or Mobius circle, Mobius strip, yeah. That so it's also called the Dirac dance, and I learned this my first year of college from the quantum mechanics professor Herbert J. Bernstein at Hampshire College. And essentially, if you think of every 0 point of space-time as being a 720-degree radius, essentially. So it's a Mobius strip. So the Dirac dance is like if you have a wine cup in your hand, and then you hold your hand like this, and then you have to keep the wine cup you have to not spill any because you don't want to spill your wine, right? And so you have to flip your hand around like that, and then you can rotate it back around, and then it comes back around like that. Now, if you think of every 0 point of space having that 720 degrees, what the square root of -1 is, it's actually the 1/2 spin as time, and so it exists as like part of that 720 degree. The 720 degree is the symmetry, so that in order to you can't inherently measure the 1/2 spin because it's non-local, and this is the what they call the quantum measurement problem. But they have been the scientists have been doing these weak measurements that Yakir Aronoff did. And Yakir Aronoff, he first got famous working with David Bohm. So there's the Aronoff-Bohm effect. And what they proved is that if you have a electromagnetic field that's zero current, you can still have the electrons get affected by this other magnetic source, and that other magnetic source is spin. And this was first demonstrated in the Stern-Gerlach experiments, where they set up a magnetic field and then they show that the spin is changed non-locally or instantaneously, so it's a quantum entanglement. And my own professor Herbert J. Bernstein, he did this experiment using neutrons, since neutrons have a no magnetic field, no charge. So it proved that way you can actually see the 720 degree spin as the 1/2 spin. It's the weak measurements show this now using entangled photons, recreating the double slit experiment. And by using the Heisenberg mathematics, you're using the square root of -1 as matrices, matrix math. So usually the square root of -1 is taught as part of complex numbers. And so people assume that the complex numbers are already symmetric, commutative geometry. And math professor Lewis Kaufman, he emphasizes that the square root of -1 is actually from quantum algebra, and so it's a process of time before it's turned into what science defines space as, with a symmetric commutative geometry. So the square root of -1 is actually what Oliver L. Reiser, he calls it an asymmetric transitive logic. And so what he's arguing is that asymmetric transitive logic is an emergent property of the symmetric geometric continuum. And this concept of the symmetric geometric continuum is from Platonic philosophy. So everybody learns this when they learn the Pythagorean theorem, and as a irrational magnitude for the basis of geometry. And then it's the calculus when you define distance as an area between velocity and time. And then so all the numbers are just limits for this symmetric continuum geometry. And that concept, then there's a book called From Pythagoras to Einstein. So essentially, relativity is just an extension of that concept of irrational geometric um, magnitude as a continuum, as using the Pythagorean theorem. And so you extend that, you define time as just a spatial extension of another dimension of the Pythagorean theorem, essentially. But I had this discussion with math professor Lou Kaufman, because I was going back and looking at the Pythagorean theorem. If you study it as a proof of discrete natural numbers, then you realize it has to be non-commutative. And I had this insight, and so I emailed math professor Lou Kaufman. I think it was like at 10 p.m. And then he responded right back like that night saying, "Oh, you mean this?" And it was an unpublished um, mathematical proof that he had just devised for the non-commutative Pythagorean theorem. And then he relayed that back to Dirac, the Dirac dance of the 720 degree spin. So the normally the Poisson bracket is used in that Dirac. He started using the Poisson bracket to explain what Heisenberg had discovered, which is this non-commutative property of light, of the what's the word I'm thinking of, the Ritz-Heiberg Ritz-Reiberg uh, my brain's sort of frying out. But the Alain Kahn, he talks about this in his lectures. He focuses on Heisenberg, and essentially all of Alain Kahn's work is inspired by Heisenberg's discovery about the Ritz-Reiberg law. I think it's called law, that it's non-commutative when you do the spectrograph of light. And so okay, so the whole point here is Roger Penrose, he calls it fundamental time. Alain Kahn calls it primitive time. And Lou Kaufman, the math professor, he calls it primordial time. And what we're talking about here is time is inherently asymmetrical, and you can call it transitive if you want. I mean, for example, like Buddhism is based on the concept of impermanence, and so we don't in Buddhism there's no real eternal soul, because all of light eventually, as like if you think of your spirit in science, it's proven to be a coherent biophotons as like a laser, but it's also holographic, and it's powered by this fifth dimension of which is really from the future. So it's like a constant eternal reverse time, negative entropy energy. And Roger Penrose, this is what he calls proto consciousness, and it's seemingly random to scientists because of the quantum measurement problem, where you're limited to linear causality by the speed of light. But the weak measurements experiments, they've proven that this, what Yakir Aronoff calls mass or negative mass, as the real existence of a reverse time and negative frequency. So the virtual particles would be negative frequency, but then this reverse time would be the mass, and that's the true power of meditation and the emptiness. And Oliver Olivier Costa de Beauregard, he figured this out for his examination of parapsychology and the fact that Louis de Broglie' law of phase harmony actually proved that the spiritual phenomenon are a de facto proven reality based on this reverse time and negative frequency that's always guiding matter. So it's sort of like a eternal black hole, white hole, like a wormhole at the level of the photon. And I was discussing this with John G. Williamson recently, who he's been building on Louis de Broglie's research also. And so he worked with Martin van der Mark, who also co-published with Nobel physicist Gerard de Hooft. And they had an article called Light is Heavy. And they're essentially arguing, the same concept that there's this secret dimension of light is the reverse time and negative frequency information. And it's actually a force, because technically in science you can't call it energy, because energy has to be defined by this amplitude squared as intensity from the quantum measurement problem. So that's what the collapse of the wave function is this squaring of the amplitude to get the probability of from Born's law, or the Born's principle. I guess it's Born's law, but at any rate, I was just discussing this with Basil J. Hiley, the quantum physics professor. He worked with David Bohm and also Penrose. And Hiley, he says that I asked him about the Poisson bracket and whether you need to use that or not in the non-commutative understanding of quantum physics, and he said no, you don't. He said the whole point is that there's not just a Poisson bracket, but there's also the Pascual Jordan's rule, which is a different kind of bracket. I think it's called the Baker bracket. So he's saying that the whole point is it's not a probability, because since it's non-commutative and you're using discrete matrices, then you're not doing an average as statistics, and instead what you're relying on is a classical limit. So the limit of the non-commutative calculus then becomes classical. And by non-commutative calculus, I mean that Basil J. Hiley is doing a calculus based on reverse time and negative frequency, and then it's like a Fourier analysis. Okay, so this is very abstract in terms of mathematics and quantum physics, but I just use it for meditation, because Oliver L. Reiser, he's bringing it back to logic, and he's saying that the asymmetric transitive as the imaginary number is an emergent property, but the logically actually as these math professors and the quantum physics professors, they say, the philosophical implications are a whole nother matter to be understood. And for example, there was a recent overview of Roger Penrose's cyclic conformal cosmology, where he doesn't believe in inflation, and at the very end of the video, it appeared to be, it had video of Penrose talking, and then the narrator would try to explain what Penrose just said. And then at the very end of the video, it said, well, Penrose's ideas, they violate the fundamental laws of nature. But it just proved that the narrator, whoever made the video, they didn't really study Penrose, because the latest version of his model is called the palatial Twistor model. And he got that term twistor from Basil J. Hiley. He had recommended it to him, to Penrose, to use twistor. It's just Twistor. But the palatial is where Penrose is citing Alan Khan for the non-commutativity. And so by what they mean by violating the fundamental laws of nature, what they mean is symmetry. And by symmetry, they're going back to Plato and the matrix. I mean, this is the matrix, and that's what Oliver L. Reiser relies on as the music logarithmic spiral. But if you realize that actually the fundamental law of nature is asymmetry, as time being asymmetric, and this is what Penrose argues, is that because time is asymmetric, then the origin of the universe is highly coherent and based on negative entropy, and that he also calls it gravitational potential, so that the dark energy of the universe is actually just the gravitational potential energy, and that's what creates it's created from the non-locality of reverse time. So that's all I'm gonna say for now, because it's super abstract stuff, but it's actually all from music theory. It can be experienced through music if you do music training as meditation. Like if you take music on a deep level, then it leads you into meditation, and that rewires your brain. It's proven that like musicians, they have a larger corpus callosum that integrates the left and right brain, as do females also. But music training is the only type of training that will enlarge your corpus callosum, because when you listen to frequency as music, it's right brain dominant, but then of course you're using the training with the instrument as left brain dominant, because the musicians, you have to analyze the music, and that requires the corpus callosum to get enlarged. And normally the corpus callosum inhibits signals because you're relying on left brain dominance. But because musicians rely on frequency being dominant, that's right brain dominant, then the corpus callosum is no longer inhibiting signals, but it's activating the signals and resonating them. And this is what starts to open up the third eye, based on the pineal gland. And then you require meditation to take that to a deeper level. And so you can't visualize the source of the music. And at some point, then you realize the music is listening to you from the future. And that's a really kind of trippy idea for people to accept. But it has to do with the subconscious, because, well, like for example, Theodore Reich, he wrote this book, The Haunting Melody, about, he was hanging out with Brahms and Freud in Vienna, and the idea is that when you get a melody in your head, then all of a sudden you're doing something, and then you get this song in your head, and then if you remember the words to the melody, then the words will reveal to you your subconscious emotions that you're experiencing at that moment, because our brain works by association, and so logically it's what Gregory Bateson called the syllogism of metaphor, and that our brain actually works through the syllogism of metaphor, and that's what he used to try to model the brain based on cybernetics as systems theory. And but he wrote this book called Mind and Nature: A Necessary Unity. And I read that book my first year of college, and the teaching assistant of my quantum mechanics professor, he was reading the same book at the same time as me, and I never said anything to him about it. I just noticed that. I don't know who that was. If it, but it okay. At any rate, it might have been Lee Smolin. I don't know. I have no idea. Lee Smolin. He studied from the same professor for his first quantum mechanics class, and from Herbert J. Bernstein, who then he now designed the quantum teleportation satellite system, and it's utilizing the same concept of the 720-degree spin as the he calls it a donut, which is it's a non-commutative torus essentially, and that by using that model, he's able to get more information and have it be protected better, which is the whole point of the quantum entanglement as a quantum teleportation signal system with the satellites. And okay, so I gotta go like do some real work or whatever. Okay, so thanks for that awesome research by Leo and Sebs, and really enjoyed that. And they mentioned my name at the end of their video, discuss this idea, so that's why I'm responding back here.